Welcome to today's session, ICT and Teacher Education. Information and communication technologies are a major factor in shaping the new global economy and producing rapid changes in society. For education to reap the full benefits of ICTs in learning, it is essential that pre-service and in-service teachers have basic ICT skills and competencies. Teacher education institutions and programs must provide leadership for pre-service and in-service teachers and model the new pedagogies and tools for learning. They must also provide leadership in determining how the new technologies can best be used in the context of the culture, needs and economic conditions within the country. To accomplish these goals, teacher education institutions must work closely and effectively with school teachers and administrators, national or state educational agencies, teacher unions, business and community organizations, politicians and other important stakeholders in the educational system. Teacher education institutions also need to develop strategies and plans to enhance the teaching learning process within teacher education programs and to assure that all future teachers are well prepared to use the new tools for learning. As noted in the UNESCO World Education Report, Teachers and Teaching in a Changing World, UNESCO 1998, the young generation is entering a world that is changing in all spheres: scientific and technological, political, economic, social and cultural. The emergence of knowledge-based society is changing the global economy and the status of education. There is growing awareness among policymakers, business leaders and educators that the educational system designed to prepare learners for an agrarian or industrially based economy will not provide students with the knowledge and skills they will need to thrive in the 21st century's knowledge-based economy and society. The new possibilities exist largely as the result of two converging forces. First, the quantity of information available in the world, much of it relevant to survival and basic well-being, is exponentially greater than that available only a few years ago, and the rate of its growth is accelerating. A synergistic effect occurs when important information is coupled with a second modern advance, the new capacity to communicate among people of the world. The opportunity exists to harness this force and use it positively, consciously and with design in order to contribute to meeting defined learning needs. As is the case for other sectors of the wider economy and society, education will need to come to terms with the new technologies. This could require substantial public and private sector investments in software research and development, purchase of hardware and renovation of schools. It will be difficult for national policy makers to resist finding the necessary resources, whatever their sensibilities, for expenditure on education, although without international cooperation and assistance, the poorest countries could fall still further behind. Parents and the public at large, in industrial countries at least, are unlikely to accept for too long the notion that education should be less well equipped with the new technologies than other areas of social and economic activity. The challenge confronting our educational system is how to transform the curriculum and teaching learning process to provide students with the skills to function effectively in this dynamic, information-rich and continuously changing environment. The technology-based global economy also poses challenges to countries as national economies become more internationalized with the increasing flow of information, technology, products, capital and people between nations. This new economic environment is creating a new era of global competition for goods, services, and expertise. All of these changes are producing dramatic shifts in the political, economic, and social structures of many countries around the world. In industrialized nations, the economic base is shifting from industry to information. This shift also demands new knowledge and skills in the workforce. ICTs have changed the nature of work and the types of skills needed in most fields and professions. While they have on the one hand created a wide array of new jobs, many of which did not even exist 10 years ago, they have also replaced the need for many types of unskilled or low-skilled workers. For example, the new smart agricultural equipment using advanced digital and industrial technology is able to do the work previously done with a large number of low-skilled agricultural workers. In addition, new manufacturing plants are requiring fewer low-skilled workers. These trends pose new challenges to educational systems to prepare students with the knowledge and skills needed to thrive in a new and dynamic environment of continuous technological change and accelerating the growth in knowledge production. Education is at the confluence of powerful and rapidly shifting educational, technological, and political forces that will shape the structure of educational systems across the globe for the remainder of this century. Many countries are engaged in a number of efforts to effect changes in the teaching-learning process to prepare students for an information and technology-based society. The UNESCO World Education Report of 1998 notes that the new technologies challenge traditional conceptions of both teaching and learning, and by reconfiguring how teachers and learners gain access to knowledge, have the potential to transform teaching and learning processes. ICTs provide an array of powerful tools that may help in transforming the present isolated, teacher-centered, and text-bound classrooms into rich, student-focused, interactive knowledge environments. To meet these challenges, schools must embrace the new technologies and appropriate the new ICT tools for learning. They must also move forward the goal of transforming the traditional paradigm of learning. To accomplish this goal requires both a change in the traditional view of the learning process and an understanding of how the new digital technologies can create new learning environments in which students are engaged learners, able to take greater responsibility for their own learning and constructing their own knowledge. Thomas Kuhn suggests that revolutions in science come about when the old theories and methods will not solve new problems. He calls these changes in theory and methods a paradigm shift. There is widespread concern that the educational experiences provided in many schools will not prepare students well for the future. Many educators and business and government leaders believe that creating a paradigm shift in views of the learning process, coupled with applications of the new information technologies, may play an important role in bringing educational systems into alignment with the knowledge-based, information-rich society. The traditional view of learning process. The existing view of the learning process emerged out of the factory model of education at the turn of 20th century was highly effective in preparing large numbers of individuals with skills needed for low-skilled positions in industry and agriculture. The innovation of classrooms with 20 to 30 students was created along with the concept of standardized instruction for everyone. In the traditional teacher-centered approach to learning, the teacher is the expert and the dispenser of knowledge and to students. It is largely a broadcast model of learning where the teacher serves as the repository and transmitter of knowledge to the students. The traditional educational paradigm is often characterized by the following views of learning. Brewer, in his book Schools for Thought, notes that research overwhelmingly concentrates on the weaknesses of poor children. Very little research has been done on their strengths. In addition, the weaknesses identified are often deficiencies in terms of the traditional organization and content of schooling. Very little thought has been given to the idea of changing schooling to accommodate new kinds of students. All the effort has gone to changing the students so that they will fit into the schools. In addition, the underlying assumptions about poor students, motivation, language and conceptual development have militated against offering them a literacy of thoughtfulness and have favored a low-level, atomized, concrete, basic skills curriculum. The language of that curriculum has been so simplified that it is both boring and artificial. It has been stripped of its richness and context and made fundamentally meaningless, which is to say unabsorbable by normal people except through memorization, whose effects last only a few hours or days. Brewer 1993 notes that the technology of mass education is quite adept at breaking knowledge and skills into thousands of little standardized, decontextualized pieces which could be taught and tested one at a time. Neil Postman, in his book Teaching as a Subversive Activity, states that our educational systems break knowledge and experience into subjects, relentlessly turning wholes into parts, history into events, and without restoring continuity. Frequently, the textbook or teacher provides only one linear path through a narrowly bounded content area or sequence of standardized instructional units. For example, in a mathematics text, only one correct problem solution trail may be offered for a specific subclass of problems. However, the problems encountered in daily life seldom have only one solution path or sequence. Changes in views of the learning process. In contrast to the traditional teaching learning paradigm, a new paradigm of the teaching learning process is emerging based on 3 decades of research in human learning that encompasses the following views of the human learning process. Learning is a natural process. The natural state of the brain is to learn, however, not everyone learns in the same way. There are different learning, perceptual and personality styles that must be considered in the design of learning experiences for the individual student. Given interesting and rich learning environments and supportive and stimulating teachers, students will learn. Teachers have often noted that children who appear disruptive or to have short attention snaps when confronted with typical classroom instruction may spend long periods engaged in meaningful and interesting computer-related activities. Learning is a social process. The communal context of knowledge and learning is beginning to be rediscovered as evidenced by the rapid growth of quality circles and computer-supported collaborative work in business, government, medicine and higher education. As Lev Vygotsky 1978 noted long ago, students learn best in collaboration with peers, teachers, students and others when they are actively engaged in meaningful, interesting tasks. ICTs provide opportunities for teachers and students to collaborate with others across the country and across the globe. They also provide new tools to support this collaborative learning in the classroom and online. Learning is an active and not a passive process. In most fields, people are faced with the challenge of producing knowledge rather than simply reproducing knowledge. To allow students to move towards competence, they must be actively engaged in the learning process in activities such as solving real problems, producing original writing, completing scientific research projects, dialoguing with others on important issues, providing artistic and musical performances, and constructing physical objects. The traditional curriculum asks students only to recall and describe what others have accomplished or produced. While all production of knowledge must be based on an understanding of prior knowledge, the mere reproduction of knowledge without its connection to production of knowledge is largely a passive activity that neither fully engages nor challenges the students. Learning may either be linear or non-linear. Much of what now happens in schools appears based on the notion that the mind works like a serial processor that is designed to process only one piece of information at a time in sequential order. But the mind is a wonderful parallel processor that may attend to and process many different types of information simultaneously. Cognitive theory and research sees learning as a reorganization of knowledge structures. The knowledge structures are stored in semantic memory as schema or cognitive maps. Students learn by augmenting, combining and rearranging a collection of cognitive maps, many of which overlap or are interconnected through a complex network of associations. There are many ways that students may acquire or process information and assimilate it into their existing knowledge structures. Although some knowledge domains such as mathematics may perhaps lend themselves to a linear approach, not all learning can or should occur linearly. Learning is integrative and contextualized. Pribram's holistic brain theory suggests that information presented globally is more easily assimilated than information presented only in a sequence of information elements. It is also easier for students to see relations and to make connections. Jacob Bronski, 1990, in Science and Human Values, made the point that to discover the connection between what had seemed two isolated facts of existence is a creative act. Whether the field is art or science, he calls it an act of unifying. This is not something that can be done for learners. These connections cannot be made into learners' minds. Information can be given, the connection can even be stated. But even if the information is repeated, it cannot be assumed that it is really known. The learners must discover it for themselves. This is not to say that learners must discover everything unaided. The teacher's role is to help them in several ways to make connections and to integrate knowledge. Learning is based on a strength model of student abilities, interest and culture. Based on the work of Howard Gardner and others, schools are beginning to consider the specific strength and interest that students bring to the learning environment and are designing learning activities that build on students' strengths rather than focusing only upon remediating weakness. In addition, schools increasingly recognize diversity as a resource rather than a problem in the classroom. In contrast to the remedial and standardized concept of instruction, diversity and individual differences are valued and the learning process is designed to build on the strengths and assets brought by the learner to the classroom. Learning is assessed through task completion, products, and real problem solving of both individual and group efforts. Rather than simply evaluating students through paper and pencil tests, assessments are made using portfolios of actual performances and work in both collaborative and individual learning tasks. The traditional view of the learning process is typically teacher-centered, with teachers doing most of the talking and intellectual work while students are passive receptors of the information provided. This is not to indicate that the traditional lecture method is without value, as it allows the teacher to quickly convey lots of information to students and is a useful strategy to recall or root learning. However, it is not the most effective way to help students develop and use higher order cognitive skills to solve complex real world problems. As noted by Driscoll, 1994, we no longer can view learners as empty vessels waiting to be filled, but rather as active organisms seeking meaning. Don Tapscott, in his book Growing Up Digital: The Rise of the Net Generation, 1998, notes that we are entering a new era of digital learning in which we are in the process of transitioning from broadcast learning to interactive learning. Today, students no longer want to be passive recipients in information transfer model of learning. Rather, they want to be active participants in the learning process. There is growing recognition that today's world requires that students be able to work collaboratively with others, think critically and creatively, and reflect on their own learning processes. A shift from teaching to learning. As technology has created change in all aspects of society, it is also changing our expectations of what students must learn in order to function in the new world economy. Students will have to learn to navigate through large amounts of information, to analyze and make decisions, and to master new knowledge domains in an increasingly technological society. They will need to be lifelong learners, collaborating with others in accomplishing complex tasks and effectively using different systems for representing and communicating knowledge to others. A shift from teacher-centered instruction to learner-centered instruction is needed to enable students to acquire the new 21st century knowledge and skills. Shifting the emphasis from teaching to learning can create a more interactive and engaging learning environment for teachers and learners. This new environment also involves a change in the roles of both teachers and students. The role of the teacher will change from knowledge transmitter to that of learning facilitator, knowledge guide, knowledge navigator, and co-learner with the student. The new role does not diminish the importance of teacher, but requires new knowledge and skills. Students will have greater responsibility for their own learning in this environment as they seek out, find, synthesize, and share their knowledge with others. ICTs provide powerful tools to support the shift to student-centered learning and the new roles of teachers and students. Every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level, first between people and then inside the child. This applies equally to voluntary attention, to logical memory, and to formation of concepts. All higher functions originate as actual relationships between individuals. A second aspect of Lev Vygotsky's theory is the idea that the potential for cognitive development is limited to a zone of proximal development, ZPD. This zone is the area of exploration for which the student is cognitively prepared, but requires help and social interaction to fully develop. A teacher or more experienced peer is able to provide the learner with scaffolding to support the student's evolving understanding of knowledge domains or development of complex skills. Collaborative learning, discourse, modeling, and scaffolding are strategies for supporting the intellectual knowledge and skills of learners and facilitating intentional learning. The implications of Vygotsky's theory are that learners should be provided with socially rich environments in which to explore knowledge domains with their fellow students, teachers, and outside experts. ICTs can be used to support the learning environment by providing tools for discourse, discussions, collaborative writing and problem solving, and by providing online support systems to scaffold students' evolving understanding and cognitive growth. Let me now move on to summarize this session. ICT helps in the professional development of teaching and learning and individuals involved in programs of teacher education. It can be infused in the learning process so as to acquire knowledge and skill effectively. ICT provides access to resources so that teachers can apply new knowledge and skills that they have learned. Communication technology will be able to develop the capacity of teacher and teacher educator at the same time, strengthen the capacity of teacher educator, which is the fundamental requirement of effective transactional strategy. Ultimately, the power of ICTs will be determined by the ability of teachers to use the new tools for learning to create rich, new and engaging learning environments for their students. The UNESCO World Education Report 1998 notes that the challenge for ICTs in teacher education is to assure that the new generation of teachers as well as current teachers are well prepared to use new learning methods, processes and materials with the new ICT tools for learning. Thank you for watching this session. Have a nice day. Goodbye.